I lay awake, unable to sleep, the clock on the nightstand casting an unsettling light across the room. The sound of the ticking clock seemed to amplify my frustration. Beside me, my husband Mark slept soundly, his breathing slow and rhythmic. How could he be so deeply asleep while I lay awake, overwhelmed by a torrent of thoughts? I sighed, rolling over and trying to close my eyes. But then, ping, a faint vibration against the wooden surface. It was Mark's phone. I tried to ignore it at first, but curiosity gnawed at me. Who would be messaging him at this hour? My heart raced as I reached for the phone, careful not to wake him. Today was great. I can't wait for tomorrow, the message read. The words seemed to rip through the last of my disbelief. My hands shook as I scrolled, barely able to breathe. Can't wait to see you again. You looked amazing tonight. Miss you. A flood of messages followed, each one a stab to my chest. My mind screamed at me, already knowing the truth, but unwilling to admit it. He was cheating. Mark, the man I had trusted for 20 years, had betrayed me. Anger flared within me, pushing aside the shock. Without a second thought, I shook him awake. Wake up, Mark. He groaned, barely stirring. Wake up, I repeated, my voice sharp, piercing the stillness. Blinking in confusion, he looked at me. What's wrong? I held up his phone, my hand trembling. Who is she? Mark sat up, his face draining of color as the realization hit him. It's not what you think. He started. Don't. I cut him off, my voice shaking. Don't insult me with lies. I read the messages. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling deeply. I didn't mean for this to happen. A bitter laugh escaped me. Oh, so it just happened? How long, Mark? How long have you been lying to me? 6 months, he whispered, barely audible. The room spun around me, my chest tightening. 6 months. Half a year of deceit, of sneaking behind my back while I blindly trusted him. Get out, I whispered. Wait, please. His voice cracked, but I refused to show weakness in front of him. He hesitated, searching my face for some sign of forgiveness, but I had nothing left to offer. He quickly gathered his things, and I watched as he left. My arms wrapped around myself as if trying to keep my shattered heart from falling apart. The door slammed behind him, and with it, the life I thought I knew. Once he was gone, the adrenaline ebbed, leaving an emptiness behind. My knees buckled, and I collapsed to the floor, tears flowing freely. I had no idea how long I stayed there, sobbing into the darkness, but eventually I felt a warm hand on my shoulder. Mom? I turned to see my son, Jaden, standing in the doorway, his brows furrowed with concern. He was 19 now, almost an adult, yet in that moment, he was still my little boy, the only person left in this house that suddenly felt vast and empty. I wiped my tears quickly, trying to regain my composure. Jaden, go back to bed. It's late. But he didn't move. Instead, he came closer and knelt beside me. I heard you yelling. What happened? I couldn't find the words. How could I tell my son that the man he had admired had torn apart our family? His gaze fell on the phone still clutched in my hand, and when he saw the messages, his jaw tightened, his fists clenching. He cheated, didn't he? He asked, his voice trembling with anger. I took a sharp breath. Yes, I whispered. Jaden nodded. Without another word, he pulled me into a tight embrace. I broke down again, sobbing against him as he held me, murmuring comforting words. I'm so sorry, Mom. You don't deserve this. I clung to him, his warmth the only thing keeping me grounded. I don't know what to do, I admitted. We'll figure it out, he said with quiet determination. You're not alone. For the first time since reading those messages, I allowed myself to believe him. The next few days passed in a blur of emotions, anger, heartache, and exhaustion. Jaden stayed by my side, ensuring I ate and even making me laugh when I thought I'd forgotten how. He had always been a good son, but now he was my rock. One evening, as I sat on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, Jaden plopped down beside me. Okay, enough of this, he said, grabbing the remote. I blinked at him. What? You're not going to sit here and mope forever. We're going out. I frowned. Out? Where? Anywhere. Movie, dinner, whatever you want. Just, let's do something. You need a break. I hesitated. The thought of leaving the house, of facing the world when I felt so vulnerable, was daunting. But Jaden's determined expression made me reconsider. Okay, I finally said. Dinner sounds good. His face lit up with a grin. Great. Get dressed. No sad clothes, either. I laughed for the first time in days. Bossy, just looking out for you, he said, nudging me playfully. Besides, I'm your favorite son, right? You're my only son. Exactly, he grinned. Hurry up, Mom. Let's make some new memories. As I watched him disappear down the hall, something inside me shifted. I had lost my husband, but I still had my son, and that was more than enough. I put on my brightest clothes, determined to shake off the gloom that had taken over my life these past few days. A little color, some makeup, and a spritz of perfume. Small gestures that felt like defiance against the pain still lingering in my chest. When I stepped out of my room, Jaden's face lit up. You look great, Mom, he said, with a smile that warmed my heart. I chuckled, shaking my head. It's just a dress, Jaden. He tilted his head, studying me. No, it's not just a dress. You look happy. His words struck me, sending a pang through my chest. Was I happy? I wasn't sure, but I was trying, and that had to count for something. He drove us to the movies, playing our favorite songs on the way and singing in his off-key, exaggerated voice just to make me laugh. And it worked. For the first time in days, I felt lighter. The laughter of the audience at the comedy movie surrounded me, and I let myself get lost in it. I laughed too, unrestrained and real. Then I noticed Jaden wasn't looking at the screen. Instead, his gaze was on me. I furrowed my brows. What? He grinned and shook his head. Nothing. Just nice to see you like this. His words made my heart tighten in a way I couldn't explain. I nudged him playfully. Focus on the movie, Jaden. He chuckled, turning back to the screen, but a strange warmth lingered between us. After the movie, as we stepped outside into the cool night air, he looked at me. You really do look beautiful tonight. My cheeks warmed at his unexpected compliment. That's sweet of you, Jaden. I mean it, he said, his voice sincere. You should dress up more often. You always used to. You look happy when you do. I nodded slowly, feeling the truth of his words. Maybe you're right. Maybe I should. The way he smiled then, proud as if he had accomplished something, made me smile too. We walked through the mall, and his eyes caught sight of something. Hey, let's go there, he said. I turned to see what he was pointing at. The sign above the entrance read, "The Fear Room." I raised an eyebrow. A horror attraction? He smirked. Come on, it'll be fun. We used to do stuff like this all the time. That was true. Before life became weighed down with responsibilities and heartbreak, we had always sought thrills in the simplest places. I hesitated for a moment before nodding. All right, let's do it. We stepped inside and immediately the atmosphere changed. The lights dimmed and a staff member handed us instructions. The fear room was a pitch-black maze filled with disorienting noises, shifting floors, and hidden surprises meant to scare us. Jaden grinned. Stick close to me, okay? I rolled my eyes. I think I can handle it. But as soon as we entered the dark hallway, I regretted my overconfidence. The darkness swallowed us whole, and I instinctively reached out, finding Jaden's arm. Whoa, he chuckled. That was fast, I muttered, tightening my grip on his sleeve as something clattered in the distance. Shut up. I've got you, Mom, he said softly. We moved cautiously through the maze, and at one point, the floor shifted beneath us, making me gasp. Jaden pulled me closer, steadying me. You okay? He asked in a low voice. I nodded, though he couldn't see it. Just not used to this anymore. Guess we'll have to change that, he murmured, squeezing my hand before leading us forward. The further we went, the more unpredictable the room became. Sudden gusts of air, eerie whispers, and something brushing against our arms all heightened our senses. At one point, I stumbled, and Jaden caught me, his arms wrapping around me to steady me. As my heart raced, I felt something else stir inside me. Got you, he said softly, his hands lingering on my waist, just a moment longer than necessary. My breath caught. Thanks, I murmured, feeling acutely aware of how close we were. We continued moving, hands still linked, drawing closer with each unexpected sound. The experience was meant to trigger fear, but with Jaden by my side, all I felt was safe. When we reached the exit, my pulse was still racing, not entirely from fear. Jaden grinned. You survived. I laughed breathlessly. Barely. He studied me for a moment before brushing a strand of hair from my face. You're glowing. I opened my mouth to reply, but the words caught in my throat. The drive home was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Something had shifted, though I wasn't sure what. When we reached home, I turned to him. "Thanks for tonight, Jaden." He smiled. "Anytime, Mom. You deserve to be happy." As I stepped inside, I realized I did feel happy. But more than that, I cherished the memory of his hand in mine, the sound of his voice in the dark, and the way my heart had raced, not just from fear, but from something else I wasn't yet ready to name. When we got home, I kicked off my shoes and stretched, feeling more relaxed than I had in weeks. The night had been fun, something I hadn't realized I needed. I turned to Jaden, about to thank him again, when he suddenly grinned. "How about a glass of wine?" he asked casually, heading to the kitchen. I raised an eyebrow. "Wine? Yeah." He shrugged, opening the cabinet and pulling out a bottle. "Why not? We're celebrating, right?" "Celebrating what?" I teased, stepping closer. He gave me a knowing look. "You're smiling again. That's worth celebrating." His words caught me off guard, a warmth spreading through my chest that had nothing to do with the wine. Before I could respond, he added, "And since we're celebrating, let me make dinner." I laughed. "You cooking? That's new." "I've learned a thing or two," he said, opening the fridge and gathering ingredients. "Just sit back and relax. You deserve it." I leaned against the counter, watching him with amusement as he moved around the kitchen with confidence. "I have to say I'm impressed," I said. "When did you learn to cook?" "Pick up things," he replied, grinning. "You're not the only one in this house with skills." I chuckled, sipping my wine as I watched him chop vegetables, his hands steady and precise. The way he carried himself, calm and in control, made me see him differently. He wasn't just my son anymore. He was a man. As he stirred something on the stove, humming to himself, I found myself admiring him in a way I hadn't before. He had always been kind and looked out for me, but tonight it felt different. He was treating me with a level of care that no one else ever had. Something stirred inside me, something I wasn't ready to name. Without thinking, I stepped forward, wrapping my arms around him from behind. He stiffened for a moment, surprised, then relaxed into my embrace. "What's this for?" he asked softly. I rested my cheek against his back, closing my eyes. "For everything." Jaden turned off the stove and turned to face me, his eyes searching mine, something deep and unreadable in them. "You don't have to thank me, Mom," he said softly. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words never came. The space between us felt charged, something unspoken stretching tight. His hand reached up to tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering against my skin. "You deserve to be treated like this," he murmured. My heart raced. I wasn't sure what I was about to say. Maybe I would tell him this was crazy, that we were getting too close to a line we shouldn't cross. But before I could say anything, he leaned in and we kissed. His lips were warm, hesitant at first, as if waiting for me to pull away. But I didn't. Instead, I melted into him, letting the moment take over. The weight of the past, all the pain I had carried inside, faded away. For the first time in years, I felt wanted, loved, and I didn't want to let it go.